The message came at 3:47 in the morning, Korean Standard Time. Commander was sleeping in her small apartment near the United Earth Defense Council headquarters when her phone rang. She answered it before the second ring, a habit she had developed over 20 years of military service. "Commander, you need to come in immediately," said the voice on the other end. "We have contact." Did not ask questions. She dressed in 4 minutes and drove through the empty streets of Seoul. The city was quiet and peaceful, its towers reaching toward a sky full of stars. She did not know it yet, but this would be the last peaceful night Earth would see for a long time. When she arrived at the headquarters, she found chaos. Officers ran through hallways. Screens showed images that made no sense. And in the main conference room, the highest leaders of Earth's military sat in stunned silence, watching a video that had been transmitted from deep space. The video showed ships, thousands of them. They were massive, dark, and shaped like insects with sharp edges. They moved through space in perfect formation, blocking out the stars behind them. A counter in the corner of the screen showed a number that kept climbing. 8,000, 10,000, 12,000 ships. "They call themselves the Dominion," said a young analyst, his voice shaking. "They sent this message along with the video." He pressed a button and a new image appeared on the screen. It showed a creature unlike anything had ever seen. It stood 3 meters tall, with a hard shell covering its body like armor. Its face had no expression that human eyes could read. When it spoke, its voice was translated by a computer into flat, emotionless words. "Species of Earth," the creature said. "I am High Emissary of the Dominion. Your world has been selected for integration into our empire. You will surrender all military assets, all governmental control, and all population for assignment to labor colonies. You have 72 hours to comply. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your planet. This is not a negotiation. This is your fate." The video ended. The room remained silent. Looked around at the faces of her fellow officers. She saw fear. She saw confusion. She saw some who looked ready to cry, but she also saw something else in a few eyes. She saw anger. "How many worlds have they conquered?" she asked. The analyst checked his data. "According to signals we've intercepted, over 300. Every single one surrendered after seeing the fleet. No species has ever successfully resisted them." Admiral, an old man with gray hair and sharp eyes, stood up slowly. He had fought in 3 wars during his long career. He had seen death and destruction, but he had never seen anything like this. "Show me their weapon capabilities," he said. The screens changed to show analysis of the ships. Their weapons could destroy cities in seconds. Their shields could block anything Earth could throw at them. Their numbers were overwhelming. By every measure, by every calculation, humanity had no chance. "They expect us to surrender," Admiral said. "Every other species did. They probably think we're already beaten." "Aren't we?" asked one of the younger officers. Admiral turned to look at him. "Son, I've been fighting battles my whole life. The moment you believe you're beaten, you are. But until that moment, you're still in the fight." Commander stepped forward. "We have 72 hours. What can we do in 72 hours? A door opened and a woman walked in. She was small, with glasses and messy hair tied back in a quick ponytail. Her name was Doctor, and she led Earth's most classified research division. Very few people in the room even knew she existed. "Quite a lot, actually," Doctor said. She carried a tablet computer and looked far too calm for someone who had just learned about an alien invasion. "Doctor," Admiral said, "what do you have for us?" Doctor connected her tablet to the main screen. Images appeared showing a crash site in Antarctica, dated 30 years ago. The wreckage of a small spacecraft lay in the ice. "In 2117, we recovered an alien scout ship. It was badly damaged, but we were able to study it. We kept it completely secret because we didn't know if more would come. Well, more have come." She pressed a button, and the images changed to show technical diagrams. The shields are powerful, but they have a weakness. They operate on a specific frequency. If we can disrupt that frequency, the shields fail completely. We've spent 30 years developing a device that can do exactly that. Hope flickered in the room like a small flame. "How many of these devices do we have?" Commander asked. "Currently, 12, but we can make more. We've already prepared thousands of satellites to carry them. We just never had a reason to launch them." Doctor smiled slightly. "Now we have a reason." Admiral nodded slowly. "Even without shields, their fleet is massive. Our ships number in the hundreds. Theirs number in the thousands." "Then we don't fight them directly," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see General enter the room. He was a tall man known for thinking in ways others considered strange or even crazy. But his strategies had won battles that seemed impossible. "We make them think they've already won," General continued. "We surrender, we bow, we cry and beg. We give them exactly what they expect from a weak species." "You want us to actually surrender?" an officer asked in disbelief. "I want us to pretend to surrender. There's a difference." General walked to the main screen and pulled up a map of Earth. "We have 72 hours. In that time, we evacuate every major city. We move our population underground. We deploy Doctor's satellites. We position our fleet in hiding spots throughout the solar system. And we wait." Commander understood immediately. "We let them come to us. We let them lower their guard. And when they think they've won, we show them what humanity is really made of," General finished. The room was quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. It felt like the quiet before a storm. Admiral looked at each person in the room. "This plan is insane. It requires perfect coordination across the entire planet. It requires millions of people to follow orders without question. It requires everything to go exactly right. The chances of success are small," Doctor said, "but not zero." "Not zero," Admiral repeated. He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had found one last battle worth fighting. "In my experience, that's all you ever need." Commander stood straight and addressed the room. "We have 72 hours to save our species. Every minute counts. Every person matters. They think they know what we are. They think we're weak. They think we're easy. They think we're just another conquest." She looked out the window at the Seoul skyline, where lights were beginning to turn on as the city woke up to a normal day, not knowing that everything had changed. "Let's show them how wrong they are." The orders went out within the hour. Across the world, humanity began to move, not toward surrender but toward the greatest deception in the history of any species. They had conquered 300 worlds. They had never lost. They had never even faced a real fight. They were about to learn that Earth was different. Earth fights back. The first 24 hours were madness. Across every continent, people received emergency alerts on their phones and televisions. The messages were simple and terrifying. Aliens had arrived, and Earth was preparing to fight. Everyone needed to evacuate to underground shelters immediately. Lieutenant stood in the command center beneath Tokyo, watching screens that showed the movement of millions of people. He was young, only 28 years old, but he had been chosen to coordinate the evacuation because of his ability to stay calm when everything was falling apart. "Status report," he said into his headset. "North America at 62% evacuated," came one reply. "Europe at 58%. Asia at 67%, Africa at 49%. The numbers were not good enough. They needed everyone underground before they arrived. Every person left on the surface would be in danger. "Push harder," ordered. "Tell local authorities to use every vehicle available. Buses, trains, trucks, personal cars. I don't care if people have to walk. Get them underground." On the surface, the evacuation was a sight no one had ever seen before. Roads were packed with people moving in one direction, down. into subway tunnels that had been secretly expanded over the years, into underground bunkers built during old wars, into cave systems that had been prepared for this very moment. Most people did not know these places existed until now. In Seoul, Commander prepared for her role in the deception. She stood in front of a camera in an empty government building. Her uniform was slightly messy. Her hair was not perfect. Her eyes showed fear and exhaustion. Everything was calculated to make her look weak and broken. "Begin recording," she said. The red light on the camera turned on. "High Emissary," began, her voice trembling. "The people of Earth have received your message. We understand the power of the Dominion. We have seen your fleet. We know we cannot win." She paused and lowered her head, as if the words were too painful to speak. "We will surrender, but we ask for more time. Our population is frightened. They need to be prepared for what comes next. Please give us 48 more hours to organize ourselves. We will not resist. We only ask for time to accept our fate with dignity." She looked up at the camera with tears in her eyes. The tears were real, but they were not tears of fear. They were tears of rage that she forced to look like tears of submission. "Please, High Emissary, we beg you." The recording was sent into space. Across the solar system, in his massive command ship, High Emissary watched it with his advisors. The insects made sounds that might have been laughter. "Pathetic," said. "They cry and beg like all the others. Grant them their 48 hours. It will make no difference. This world will fall like every world before it." His advisors agreed. Why wouldn't they? 300 species had done exactly the same thing, begged for mercy, asked for more time, and in the end they all surrendered and became slaves. Humanity was no different. At least that was what they believed. While Commander played her role on Earth, Captain was working in the darkness of space. She was an aerospace engineer who had spent her life building ships and satellites. Now she commanded a fleet of small, silent craft that carried Dr. shield-disrupting devices. "Team 7, report," said through her communication system. "Satellites deployed in grid pattern around the enemy fleet's eastern section," came the reply. "They think we're just space debris." "Good, Team 8. Deployment complete. We're moving to the secondary positions now." Checked her screens. Thousands of tiny dots surrounded the massive fleet. Each dot was a satellite that looked like garbage floating in space. Old metal, broken equipment, the kind of junk that accumulated around any planet with a space program. They scanned it and dismissed it as unimportant. They did not know that inside each piece of garbage was a weapon that could destroy their greatest defense. Back on Earth, Doctor worked without sleep. Her laboratory was now deep underground, where hundreds of scientists and engineers worked around the clock to build more devices. Every hour, another batch was completed and sent into space. "How many do we have now?" she asked her assistant. 8,712, the assistant replied. "Enough to cover their entire fleet with significant overlap. We need 10,000 to be safe. Keep working." General visited the laboratory that night. He found Doctor drinking her 10th cup of coffee and staring at technical diagrams on a massive screen. "You should rest," he said. "I'll rest when they are gone," she replied without looking at him. "Or when I'm dead. One of those will happen soon." General smiled slightly. He liked her attitude. "I came to tell you that the evacuation is nearly complete. 94% of the global population is now underground. And the other 6%. Some refuse to leave their homes. Some are too far from shelters. We're doing everything we can." Doctor finally looked at him. Her eyes were red from exhaustion, but her mind was still sharp. "If this works, we'll save everyone who's underground. If it fails, it won't matter where anyone is." "It will work," General said. "It has to." In Seoul, the clock counted down. 48 hours became 30. 30 became 20. The fleet moved closer to Earth, confident in their coming victory. High Emissary prepared his speech for when he would accept humanity's formal surrender. He planned to land in Seoul, where the humans had promised to meet him. Admiral watched the approaching fleet from his command center beneath the Pacific Ocean. His small fleet of 200 ships was hidden among asteroids and behind moons, waiting for his signal. "They're taking the bait," he said to his officers. "Every ship is focused on Earth. They're not even watching their backs." "Why would they?" replied one officer. "No one has ever attacked them before." "First time for everything," Admiral said. On the final day, Commander flew to a meeting point just outside Seoul. A small shuttle was descending from orbit, carrying High Emissary himself. He wanted to personally oversee humanity's surrender. He wanted to see the fear in their eyes. Stood alone on a platform, waiting. The shuttle landed with a sound like thunder. The doors opened and emerged, surrounded by guards. He was even larger in person, his shell gleaming in the sunlight. "You are the human leader?" asked. "I am Commander. I speak for Earth's Defense Council." Made a sound that might have been amusement. "You are small, soft. It is a wonder your species survived this long." Bowed her head. "We are indeed small, High Emissary. We cannot match your strength." "No, you cannot," stepped forward until he towered over her. "Where are your people? The cities appear empty." "They are hiding. They are afraid. They will come out when you give the order." Studied her for a long moment. Behind his strange eyes, something that might have been suspicion flickered, but then it faded. He had seen this too many times before. Fear, submission, surrender. It was always the same. "Very well," he said. "Bring your leaders here. We will sign the documents of surrender, and your world will belong to the Dominion." Nodded. "Of course, High Emissary. They are on their way." She checked her watch. In exactly 3 hours the trap would spring. She just had to keep talking until then. Just 3 more hours of pretending to be weak. 3 more hours of bowing and scraping. And then humanity would show the galaxy what it really meant to fight back. Above them, the fleet waited in orbit, shields glowing with power, weapons ready. They were so confident in their victory that they never noticed the thousands of satellites slowly activating around them. The deception was almost complete. The signal came at exactly noon, Korean time. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Admiral spoke one word into his communication system. "Now." 8,000 satellites activated at the same moment. They sent out a pulse that moved at the speed of light, washing over the fleet in less than a second. On 12,000 warships, alarms began to scream. Officers rushed to their stations. High Emissary, still standing on the platform in Seoul, looked up at the sky as his communication device exploded with panicked messages. "What is happening?" he demanded. In orbit, the fleet was in chaos. Their shields, the greatest protection any species in the galaxy had ever developed, were flickering like dying candles. Ship captains shouted orders. Engineers tried to restore power, but it was no use. One by one, across the entire fleet, the shields failed completely. For the first time in 300 years of conquest, warships were vulnerable. Admiral's voice came through every human communication channel. "All ships, this is Admiral. The enemy shields are down. Attack." From behind asteroids and moons, from the dark side of planets and the shadows of space debris, Earth's fleet emerged. 200 ships was a small number compared to 12,000. But these ships were fast, well-armed, and commanded by pilots who knew they were fighting for everything that mattered. Pilot led the first attack squadron. She was only 25 years old, but she had trained her whole life for combat. She never thought she would fight aliens, but it turned out that enemies were enemies, no matter what they looked like. "Blue Squadron, follow my lead," she said through her helmet radio. "Target the flagship's communication array. If we cut off their coordination, they'll panic even more." Her squadron of 20 fighters screamed through space toward the largest ship. Without shields, The flagship was just a big target, locked onto the communication tower rising from its surface. "Firing," she said. 20 missiles launched at once. They crossed the distance in seconds and struck the tower with perfect accuracy. The explosion was silent in the vacuum of space, but the result was immediate. The flagship went dark, its ability to communicate with the rest of the fleet destroyed. "Direct hit," reported. "The flagship is blind and deaf." Across the battle, similar scenes played out. Human ships struck at key targets, weapon systems, engines, bridge sections. They could not destroy every ship, but they could cripple them. The commanders, used to enemies who surrendered without fighting, were slow to respond. By the time they organized a counterattack, Admiral had already repositioned his fleet. "All ships fall back to defensive positions around the moon," he ordered. "Draw them in, make them chase us." The human fleet retreated, and the followed, angry and eager for revenge. They did not realize they were being led into a trap. The moon's surface held hundreds of hidden weapon platforms, installed over decades for a moment just like this. When the fleet entered range, the moon came alive with fire. Missiles and energy beams shot up from craters and mountain ranges. The ships, still without shields, took hit after hit. "They're breaking formation," one of his officers reported. "Some are retreating toward the outer system." "Let them go," replied. "Focus on the ships that are still fighting." On Earth's surface, the battle was more personal. High Emissary tried to reach his shuttle, but Commander stood in his way. She was no longer bowing. She was no longer pretending to be weak. "Going somewhere, High Emissary?" she asked. Guards raised their weapons, but before they could fire, soldiers emerged from hidden positions all around the platform. They wore black armor and moved with deadly speed. Their leader was Sergeant, a woman known for completing missions that everyone else called impossible. "Drop your weapons," ordered the guards. The guards looked at. He was tall and powerful, a leader who had never faced defeat. But he was surrounded by enemies, cut off from his fleet, and for the first time in his long life he felt something new. He felt fear. "You cannot do this," said, his voice no longer calm. "The Dominion will destroy your world. You will all be slaves. Your children will be slaves. Your children's children will." "Be quiet," Commander said. She stepped forward until she was directly in front of him. Despite being half his size, she did not look small. "You came here thinking we were weak. You thought we would bow down like everyone else. But you made a mistake. You threatened our home." She pulled out a small device and pressed a button. A camera activated, broadcasting to every ship and across Dominion communication channels throughout the galaxy. "This is Commander of Earth. High Emissary has been captured. Your fleet is being destroyed. Your shields are useless. Your invasion has failed." She looked directly into the camera. "To every species watching this broadcast, to every world that has suffered under the Dominion, we are humans. We are from a small planet called Earth, and today we proved that they can be beaten. If we can do it, so can you. Rise up, fight back. The time of the Dominion is over." The broadcast ended, but its effects would echo across the galaxy for years to come. The battle raged for 11 more hours. They fought hard, but without coordination and without shields they were losing. Ship after ship fell silent, either destroyed or disabled. Human losses were heavy too. 47 ships were gone. Over 3,000 soldiers died defending their home. But when the fighting finally stopped, Earth was still there, and the fleet was broken. Admiral stood in his command center, looking at the tactical display. Out of 12,000 enemy ships, 8,000 had been destroyed. 4,000 had been captured. The rest had fled toward the edge of the solar system. "It's over," one of his officers said in disbelief. "We actually won." "No," replied. "This battle is over, but the war is just beginning. The Dominion is vast. They will send more ships. They will try again." "Then what do we do?" Thought for a long moment. He thought about the soldiers who had died. He thought about the families in the underground shelters, waiting to learn if they still had a planet to come home to. He thought about the broadcast commander had sent across the galaxy. "We don't wait for them to come back," he finally said. "We go to them. We take this fight to every corner of their empire, and we free every species they've ever enslaved." It was a bold plan. Some would call it crazy, but humanity had just done the impossible. Maybe crazy was exactly what they needed. Far above, the stars looked the same as they always had, but everything had changed. A small planet called Earth had faced the greatest threat in its history and refused to fall. The Dominion had finally met an enemy that would not surrender. And this was only the beginning. The video of High Emissary's capture spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. The communication network was vast and well-built, connecting hundreds of worlds. The Dominion had built it to control their empire. Now, that same network carried a message of hope to every enslaved species. On a cold mining world called Seven, an old creature named watched the broadcast in secret. He had worked in the mines for 40 years, digging precious metals for masters who considered his people nothing more than tools. His back was bent from decades of hard labor. His hands were from accidents that the never bothered to prevent. But when he saw the human commander standing over the fallen leader, something stirred in his chest, something he had forgotten existed. "They beat them," he whispered to the workers gathered around the hidden screen. "These humans beat the Dominion." "It could be a trick," said a younger worker named Tao. "They could be testing our loyalty." "No," said, shaking his head. "I've seen their tricks. This is real. Look at his face. Look at his fear. He has never felt fear before. None of them have." The next day, the workers of Seven did not go to the mines. They gathered in the central square instead, tools in their hands. When the overseers came to force them back to work, they found not scared slaves, but an angry crowd ready to fight. The uprising on Seven lasted 3 days. By the end, every on the planet was either dead or captured. It was the first world to free itself after Earth's victory, but it would not be the last. On Earth, Ambassador prepared for her new mission. She had spent her career negotiating trade deals and resolving small conflicts between nations. Now, she was being sent into space to speak for all of humanity. "You understand the importance of this mission," General told her before she left. "We cannot defeat the Dominion alone. We need allies. You need to find them." "I understand," replied. "But I have to ask, why me? There are more experienced diplomats, military leaders who would command more respect." General smiled. "Because you listen. You understand people, and the species we're trying to reach are not looking for another conqueror. They're looking for someone who will treat them as equals. That's you." Ship was small and fast, designed to avoid detection by patrols. She traveled to hidden space stations where rebels gathered, to remote planets where survivors whispered about freedom. Everywhere she went, she found species who had given up hope long ago. There were an aquatic people from a water world that had polluted with industrial waste. Their oceans were dying, and so was their species. When met their leader, a female named Sira, she found a people ready to fight for their last chance at survival. "Why should we trust humans?" Sira asked, her voice bubbling through her translation device. "We trusted the once. They promised partnership. They gave us slavery." "I can't make you trust us," answered honestly. "All I can do is show you what we're offering. Technology to help you fight, ships to evacuate your sick and elderly, and a promise that when this war is over, your world belongs to you, not to us, not to anyone else, just you." Sierra studied the human for a long moment, did not look away. She did not make promises she could not keep. She simply waited. "Very well," Sierra finally said. "They will join your coalition, but if you betray us like they did, we will destroy you ourselves." "Fair enough," replied. They were even more unusual. They were beings made of living rock, slow-moving and patient beyond human understanding. They used them as construction workers on 100 worlds, forcing them to build the very prisons that held other slaves. When met them, she found creatures who thought in centuries rather than years. "War is fast," said the leader, a being named Stone Who Speaks. "We are slow. What use are we in a fast war?" "The war will be fast," agreed, "but the peace after will need to be built slowly. We will need buildings, infrastructure, new homes for freed people. Who better to build a lasting peace than those who think in terms of forever?" Stone Who Speaks considered this for what felt like hours. The other humans in his group grew impatient, but she waited. She had learned that different species had different rhythms, and trying to rush them only made things worse. "We will help," Stone Who Speaks finally said, "not to destroy, to build." Species after species joined the coalition. The whose wings had been clipped by the whose philosophers had been executed for teaching ideas of freedom. The Shan, who had hidden in asteroid fields for generations, waiting for a chance to fight back. Each had their own skills, their own reasons, their own hopes. Back on Earth, Director oversaw the transformation of human industry. Every factory that had made consumer goods now made weapons. Every shipyard that had built merchant vessels now built warships. Scientists who had studied peaceful applications of technology now worked on ways to fight more effectively. "Production is up 400%, reported to the Council. "We're sending ships and weapons to our new allies as fast as we can make them." Doctor had a different report. "We've shared the shield disruption technology with every coalition member, but I've also made improvements. The new version is smaller, cheaper, and easier to produce. Any species with basic manufacturing capability can now make their own." "Isn't that dangerous?" one council member asked. "If we give away our advantage, what makes us special?" Doctor looked at him with tired eyes. "We're not trying to be special. We're trying to win. If sharing our knowledge helps free 1 billion people on some world we've never heard of, that's worth more than being special." The Dominion's High Council watched these developments with growing alarm. Their empire had been built on fear. When conquered species saw the fleet, they surrendered because they believed resistance was impossible. But now that belief was shattered. "We must crush this rebellion immediately," demanded Council Leader Vex. "Send our full military force to destroy Earth." "We cannot," replied Military Commander. "Our forces are spread across 300 worlds. If we concentrate them against Earth, the other worlds will rise up. We are already losing control of the outer territories." "Then what do you suggest?" His face showed something that might have been frustration. "We must be patient, rebuild our shields, develop new weapons, wait for the coalition to make mistakes, and when they do, we strike." But patience was a luxury the Dominion no longer had. Every day, more worlds broke free. Every week, more species joined the coalition. The empire that had seemed eternal was cracking, and nothing that did could stop it. In her quarters on a coalition station, Ambassador received a message from Earth. It was from Commander, who had become the coalition's symbolic leader. "You've done remarkable work," said in the recorded message. 15 species have joined us because of your efforts, but I'm calling you back. We're planning the final campaign. We're going to strike at the itself." Stared at the message for a long time. The idea of attacking the heart of the Dominion would have been unthinkable a year ago. Now it seemed almost possible. "Almost," she replied with 4 words, "On my way, don't start without me." The galaxy was waking up, and it was hungry for freedom. 3 years had passed since the Battle of Earth. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than it had in the previous 3 centuries. Over 100 worlds had broken free from the Dominion. A coalition of 12 species had formed around humanity's example. And now, the largest fleet ever assembled was gathering in the deep space between stars. Admiral stood on the bridge of the coalition flagship, looking at the tactical display. 5,000 ships from a dozen different species stretched across his screen like stars in a new constellation. Each one carried soldiers who had lost family members to the Dominion. Each one was hungry for justice. "Final status report," said. "All ships are in position," replied his second-in-command. "The defenses are strong, but our intelligence shows gaps in their patrol routes. If we time our attack correctly, we can break through before they can reinforce." Nodded, they had retreated to their core territories, pulling back fleets from the edges of their empire to protect their home. It made sense from a defensive perspective, but it also meant that when those defenses fell, the war would be effectively over. "What about our ground forces?" "Commander reports ready. She's assembled the best soldiers from every coalition species. They'll drop as soon as we secure orbital control." On a transport ship near the back of the fleet, Commander checked her equipment one last time. She was not young anymore. The 3 years of war had added gray to her hair and lines to her face, but her eyes were the same as they had always been, determined, focused, and absolutely unwilling to quit. Around her, soldiers from a dozen species prepared for the most important battle of their lives. Humans stood next to, their water-breathing equipment connected to suits designed for ground combat. Warriors, their rocky bodies covered in armor, waited patiently with the stillness of mountains. Small, quick sharpened their weapons and checked their wing attachments that allowed them to fly again for the first time in generations. "This is strange," said a soldier next to. His species had been philosophers before the came, and even now he could not help but think deeply about everything. "We are about to attack the people who conquered us. Part of me still cannot believe this is possible." "That's why we're going to win," replied. "They have never faced enemies who believed they could win. They don't know how to fight against hope." Captain commanded one of the lead assault ships. In 3 years, she had gone from aerospace engineer to one of the fleet's most respected captains. Her ship, named Dawn, had survived 18 major battles. Its hull was and patched, but its weapons were sharp and its crew was ready. "All forward batteries charged," her weapons officer reported. "Shield disruption satellites deployed and ready." "Enemy ships detected," called the sensor operator. "They're moving to intercept." Smiled grimly. "Let them come, Admiral, we're in position." Admiral's voice came through every communication system in the fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral. Behind us are the homes we're fighting to protect. Ahead of us is the empire that tried to enslave us all. Today we end them, for Earth, for every world they conquered, for every life they took. Attack." The fleet surged forward. At the same moment, satellites activated across the defensive line. Shields failed on hundreds of enemy ships, just as they had failed 3 years ago above Earth. But this time, they were prepared for the possibility. They had developed partial countermeasures that kept some shields operational. It would not be enough. Pilot led her fighter squadron through the enemy formation. She was 30 now, and her skills had been sharpened by dozens of battles. Her squadron was made up of pilots from 5 different species, all flying in perfect coordination. "Break formation and engage at will," she ordered. "Priority targets are their command ships." Her fighters scattered like angry wasps, striking at weak points in the defense. Around them, the larger ships exchanged fire in great waves of energy and explosions. It was chaos, but within the chaos there was a pattern. The coalition forces were pushing through, closer and closer to the. On the surface of that world, the population watched the battle in the sky with growing terror. They had never seen their military lose. They had never imagined there could be threatened. For the first time in their species' history, they understood what it felt like to be the ones being conquered. Council leader Vex stood in his command center, watching his fleet being destroyed piece by piece. Military commander stood beside him, silent and still. "We should surrender," finally said. "Our fleet is lost. Continuing to fight will only result in more death." "Surrender?" Vex turned to him with fury in his eyes. The Dominion does not surrender. We are the conquerors. We are the masters. We cannot bow to lesser species. Then we will die as masters, replied, and our species will die with us. Captain's ship broke through the last line of defenders. Below her, the enemy spread out like a jewel in space. Its cities glittered with lights. Its continents were green and blue, not so different from Earth in some ways. Commander, you are clear for drop, reported. Understood, beginning descent now. Drop ships carrying coalition ground forces entered the atmosphere. They landed in parks and plazas and empty spaces around the capital city. Soldiers emerged in perfect formations, their weapons ready but not firing. They were not here to destroy. They were here to liberate. Commander led the advance toward the central government building. She expected fierce resistance. Instead, she found crowds of civilians watching her in silence. Some looked angry, some looked scared, but many just looked, tired of war, tired of fear, tired of an empire that had brought them nothing but enemies. The fighting inside the government building was brief but intense. The last loyal guards of the High Council fought to the death, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. Within an hour, coalition forces had secured the building. Commander found Council Leader Vex in his private chambers. He was alone, his guards dead or captured, his power gone. He looked smaller than she expected, just an old creature waiting for the end. So, Vex said, his voice bitter, the slaves have become the masters. No, replied. There are no more masters, there are no more slaves, that's the whole point. She placed restraints on his limbs and led him outside. A camera drone followed, broadcasting to every world in the galaxy. Vex walked through crowds of his own people, who watched in silence as their leader was led away in chains. The Treaty of New Dawn was signed 3 days later on the steps of the former palace. Representatives from every coalition species stood together as the documents were finalized. The Dominion was officially dissolved. Every conquered world was declared sovereign and free. A new Galactic Council would be formed, with equal representation for all species. High Emissary, who had been a prisoner on Earth for 3 years, was brought to witness the ceremony. Ambassador stood beside him as the final signatures were added. Your empire enslaved 300 worlds, she said to him. You came to Earth expecting another easy conquest. Instead, you created the force that ended your dominion forever. How does that feel? Said nothing. He simply stared at the celebration around him with eyes that no longer held any hope. General, older now but still standing straight and proud, gave the closing address to the first session of the Free Galactic Assembly. Representatives from over 100 species filled the Great Hall, many of them seeing each other for the first time. They tried to enslave us, said, his voice strong and clear. They thought we were weak because we were young. They thought we were easy because we were small. They thought we were alone because we had never reached beyond our own planet. They were wrong on every count. He looked around the hall at faces of every shape and color, at beings of rock and water and flesh and forms humanity had never imagined. Humanity doesn't bow. We never did. We never will. But more importantly, we learned something in this war. We learned that we are stronger together than we could ever be alone. Every species in this room has something valuable to offer. Every culture has wisdom to share. Every people deserves freedom and dignity. He raised his hand, and behind him a new flag unfurled. It showed a simple design, a circle of stars, each one representing a free world, surrounding an open hand reaching upward. This is not the end of our story. This is the beginning. Together, we will build something that never could, a galaxy where strength is used to protect, not to conquer. A galaxy where different species are partners, not slaves and masters. A galaxy where the next young species that looks up at the stars will see friends waiting to welcome them, not enemies waiting to destroy them. The hall erupted in applause from 100 species. Cheers in languages humanity had never heard before filled the air. Outside, across 1,000 worlds, people who had lived in chains were celebrating their first days of freedom. Commander stood in the crowd watching General speak. Beside her, Pilot wiped tears from her eyes. Doctor, Captain, Admiral, and Ambassador were all there too, along with thousands of others who had fought for this moment. "We did it," said softly. "We actually did it." "Yes," replied, "we rewrote history." She looked up through the great windows of the assembly hall, past the celebration and the crowds and the flags of 100 free worlds. She looked up at the stars, which seemed brighter now than they ever had before. Earth's flag flew among those stars, not as conquerors, not as masters, but as liberators. And somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between galaxies, other young species were looking up at their own skis, wondering if they were alone. Humanity was ready to answer them. They were not alone. They never had been. And now they never would be.